Tonight, concern over the possible release of a man involved in the Snowtown murders.
Their lives were stolen and their loved ones now live with the loss for the rest of their lives.
A drone attack in Jordan kills 3 American troops and injures many more. And Yannick Sinner hauls himself off the canvas to win his first Grand Slam title. Good evening, Richard Davies with ABC News South Australia. They were murders that shocked the nation and left South Australia reeling. The Snowtown, or Bodies in the Barrel murders, came to light in May 1999 when bodies were found inside barrels of acid in a bank vault. In total, 11 victims were identified during the police investigation. Now, after a quarter of a century, one of the 4 men convicted for his part in Australia's worst serial killings could be granted freedom within months. Victims' families, still haunted by the horrific crimes, strongly oppose Mark Hayden's release. James Wakelin with this Stateline exclusive.
These are the faces of the victims of the so-called Snowtown murders. For every face, there are families that will never fully recover from what was done to their loved ones in one of Australia's most notorious serial killings.
They've suffered and continue to suffer unimaginable trauma. Many still suffer from nightmares, PTSD. Many remain fearful.
Now, almost 25 years after his arrest, one of the perpetrators is set to be freed. Mark Hayden, whose wife Elizabeth was one of the victims, will complete his 25-year sentence in May, and legal experts say there is nothing in the law that prevents his release.
The court has imposed a sentence. Once that sentence is complete, then he would be released from custody.
While his fellow accused, Robert Wagner, John Bunting and James Vlasakis, were convicted of murder, Hayden, who is now 65, was only found to have assisted the offenders, not to have been actively involved in the killings. Sarah Quick is the Victims' Rights Commissioner of South Australia and has spoken to the families impacted by Hayden's offending and impending release.
It's a very universal view that they would prefer he was never to be released.
The horrific crimes were uncovered by detectives who found decomposing bodies in a bank in Snowtown, 150 kilometres north of Adelaide, in May 1999.
Because of the advanced state of decomposition, it will not be possible to accurately discern how many bodies are there until exhaustive forensic testing has been completed.
In total, 8 bodies were identified from the 6 barrels found in the bank. The remains of 3 more victims were discovered elsewhere. It was a killing spree that had lasted 7 years, led by the depraved John Bunting. Claiming to target pedophiles, Bunting focused on anyone who was different, encouraging Robert Wagner, James Vlasakis and Mark Hayden to help him commit and cover up the atrocious acts. Those killed were their relatives and acquaintances: Clinton Trezise, Ray Davies, Michael Gardner, Barry Lane, Thomas Trevelyan, Gavin Porter, Troy Yude, Fred Brooks, Gary O'Dwyer, Elizabeth Hayden and David Johnson disappeared between 1992 and 1999. The killers tortured their victims to get personal details and then claimed their welfare benefits.
Their lives were stolen and their loved ones now live with the loss for the rest of their lives.
Hayden's offending included storing and moving the bodies. He co-signed the lease for the Snowtown bank vault. He was also present when 21-year-old Troy Yude was murdered. He was initially found to have been involved in assisting covering up 5 of the killings. He then pleaded guilty to 2 more counts of assisting offender. Hayden was given a non-parole period of 18 years and he's applied twice to be released, and it remains possible that he could be paroled even before he served his full sentence. James Vlasakis, who gave evidence against the other men and pleaded guilty to 4 of the murders, will be eligible to apply for parole next year. For the families of the victims, just facing the thought of Hayden being granted freedom is difficult enough.
They very much feel that they've been given a life sentence, that their pain and their trauma doesn't subside.
Both Bunting and Wagner have been told they will never be released on parole. James Wakelin, ABC News.
In response to the ABC State Line investigation, the state government has announced it's getting legal advice on what action, if any, can be taken in relation to Mark Hayden's imminent release. Parole Board Chair Francis Nelson has also offered insight into Hayden's current bid for freedom. James Wakelin has been covering the story. James, firstly, what can you tell us about Hayden's parole bid?
Richard, the Parole Board has been monitoring Hayden's behaviour in custody during 2 applications for parole. Despite good rehabilitation, the first was rejected when the board decided he needed more socialisation. Hayden's second application in 2021 is still being considered. Parole Board Chair Francis Nelson says Hayden has also demonstrated remorse and contrition for his crimes, and he's had a good prison record.
His institutional behaviour has been very good. He's been easily managed. He hasn't presented problems. There's no evidence of drug use. His work in prison seems to have been well carried out.
So, James, what legal options are available to the government?
Richard, while the state government says it's exploring all legal options in the case of Mark Hayden, Attorney General Kai Ma specifically mentioned the possibility of applying to the Supreme Court for an extended supervision order, usually reserved for the most serious of offenders. But because he wasn't convicted of murder, the court will first have to decide if Hayden meets the legal definition of a high-risk offender.
If someone meets that definition of the high-risk offender, they can have an extended supervision order placed on them that can do a number of things like electronic monitoring, impose curfews, look at who a person can associate with. So we've asked for and are getting advice on whether that applies to Mark Hayden or not.
Perhaps tellingly, the government wouldn't say whether they were considering making laws to keep Hayden in jail.
James Wakelin there. Fears of a wider regional war in the Middle East have risen after 3 US troops were killed by Iran-backed militants in Jordan. It's the first time US military personnel have been killed by hostile fire since the Israel-Hamas war erupted. President Joe Biden has vowed to respond, but he's facing intensifying pressure to confront Iran directly.
From the bridge of a British warship, an attack drone fired by Iran-backed Houthis is shot down over the Red Sea. American military bases have also come under fire in Syria, Iraq and now Jordan. This latest strike killing at least 3 US soldiers.
We lost 3 brave souls in an attack on one of our bases, and we shall respond.
The drone strike hit this US military outpost in Jordan, known as Tower 22, as troops were sleeping. At least 30 others were injured. It's in a strategically important location, at the most northeastern point where Jordan's borders meet Syria and Iraq. A group of Iran-backed factions known as the Islamic Resistance in Iraq has claimed responsibility for previous attacks in the region.
This is the tipping point. So 3 US soldiers' deaths is important. The US will have to respond even more strongly than it's done to previous attacks. And that will present dilemmas for both Baghdad and Tehran to respond in turn.
Threatening to put a match to a Middle East tinderbox, juggling multiple crises. Iran-backed Houthi militia have been boarding and seizing international ships for months in the Red Sea. Now they're hitting them with drones and missiles. Retaliatory British and US airstrikes in Yemen doing little to deter the militants. After the first deaths of American troops, fears are growing over the risk of a wider war. John Lyons, ABC News, Jerusalem.
The world's most indebted developer, Chinese property giant Evergrande, has been ordered into liquidation, owing nearly $500 billion to creditors. The order is likely to send ripples through China's crumbling financial markets as policymakers scramble to contain a deepening crisis.
Evergrande, once China's biggest real estate firm, overbuilt and overpromised. Developers powered the real estate boom that boosted the Chinese economy. But now it threatens to stall the country's economic recovery.
A winding up order has been issued.
All of their assets have been suspended.
Evergrande was believed to be a strong investment for middle-class families, hoping property was a safe place to keep their money. But it was not safe. Property prices fell and Evergrande came under pressure as the Chinese government cracked down on the enormous amount of borrowing in the property sector. A huge number of apartments remained vacant. These 14 buildings in southern China, constructed by Evergrande, were never completed.
The worry is hundreds of thousands of Chinese families not getting the flat they thought they were going to live in.
Evergrande first defaulted in 2021. It gained the notorious title of most indebted property developer in the world, owing to mind-blowing debts of around $500 billion, sending shockwaves through global financial markets.
It tried to seek a new debt restructuring plan with creditors. 2 years in limbo until today. A Hong Kong court has ordered the company be wound up, the judge declaring it was time to say enough is enough.
If you were holding on to one of these big property companies thinking that the government somehow was going to step in and underwrite issues, the reality is they're not.
Evergrande can appeal this order, a move that would drag out an already long and complicated process. Kathleen Calderwood, ABC News.
Jehovah's Witnesses committed to mandatory reporting of child sex abuse to police during the Royal Commission. But it can be revealed the church is still dealing with historical abuse cases with their own internal investigations behind closed doors. It's prompted one survivor to call for that to change. A warning, this story contains content that may be confronting for some viewers.
Kezia Witten fears the Jehovah's Witnesses are still hiding child sexual abuse.
You're a survivor every day you survive.
The 34-year-old from regional Western Australia grew up in the Jehovah's Witnesses faith, which believes Armageddon is imminent. But there was a far greater threat inside her family home. About 3 decades ago, aged just 5, Kezia Witten was sexually abused by her brother, Joel Witten, who was over 18 at the time.
He should have been hurting for me, not hurting me. Nothing like that should ever happen to a child, ever.
It left her with deep emotional scars and trauma.
I was pretty committed to killing myself.
Kezia confronted Joel later in life, and he confessed to the Jehovah's Witnesses elders in 2018, following the Royal Commission into child sexual abuse. But the elders chose to conduct their own investigation and not report the matter to police. This was despite the faith group committing to report child sexual abuse during the inquiry. Kezia then decided to report the matter to police herself after having a child of her own, and Joel pleaded guilty and was jailed late last year. The Jehovah's Witnesses didn't respond to all questions, they say, to protect the privacy of those involved, but say they regard child abuse as a crime and abhorrent sin. WA's mandatory reporting laws don't require religious organisations to report historical abuse, which occurred before 2022, even if the survivor is still currently a child. It's something survivors like Kezia Witten want changed, but the state government says the laws were not intended to address historical abuse. With her abuser now jailed, Kezia has started making candles to help her find the light in her life.
I think it's knowing that you're a lot more than what hurt you, instead of letting it consume you completely.
She says other survivors shouldn't give up hope. Brianna Fiore, ABC News.
And if you or someone you know needs help, contact Beyond Blue by phone or their website, or Lifeline on 13 11 14. Southeast Queensland is bracing for more severe weather, with the region expected to cop intense rainfall from early tomorrow. Authorities are warning it could lead to dangerous flash flooding, and the drenching will do little to ease the unbearable humidity Queenslanders have endured over recent days.
It's all anyone is talking about.
Hot and sticky.
So humid, and it's just disgusting. It's far North Queensland weather, really.
How are you finding the humidity?
Oh no, it's no good. Yeah, you can see my glasses, like it's no good.
Southeast Queensland is sweltering through heat, rain and humidity. For some, it's a holiday.
For the beach, it's really good.
For others, it's simply unbearable.
It's like sauna.
In the northwest, heavy rain is a welcome sight. Over 300 millimetres fell on grazier Wade McConaughey's McKinlay property, transforming dry paddocks into swollen dams.
I was saying to my wife yesterday, it was sort of starting to come down, and I said, you know, it'd be good if it could ease off, and she reckons I'm always negative. 1 minute I'm whinging we're not getting enough, and then we're getting too much, but there is a fine line.
Recovery efforts from ex-tropical cyclone Kirrily are grinding on.
So far we've got over 60,000 customers back on from a total of 67. And we're hoping to have we'll be up to 1,000 customers tonight still off, and we hope to have them on by tomorrow night.
This afternoon, the skies opened up in Dirranbandi, a sign of what's to come. Heavy rain will set in across much of the southeast from tomorrow, bringing the risk of widespread flash flooding.
Certainly hard to rule out anywhere really along the southeast coast in terms of the significant rain risk as well with that coastal trough. And given that it's so moist, you wouldn't take much to drop, you know, pretty sizable totals.
Humid conditions will peak on Wednesday across much of the southeast before easing by the end of the week. It's welcome news for Queenslanders who've endured a relentless summer. Victoria Pengilly, ABC News, Brisbane.
The Reserve Bank will be announcing whether to lift interest rates again in just over a week. It's the bank's method of bringing down inflation, which means the 1/3 of Australians who have a mortgage have been doing the heavy lifting when it comes to taming the economy. It's led many Australians to ask how fair the system is and whether alternative methods like increasing superannuation contributions would be fairer.
Daniel Wigg and his partner bought their home last year, days before the first interest rate rise. They're now paying an extra $1,700 a month on their mortgage.
It's a huge difference, and that's a big hole of, you know, money that we don't really have.
The 50-year-old is now working 3 nights a week at a bar on top of his full-time job to make ends meet.
Very fatigued. Yeah, and I'm not getting any younger, so that's not getting any easier.
Daniel is one of the 37% of Australians with a mortgage. As interest rates on mortgages and business loans rise, in theory, consumer spending goes down, which makes it harder for businesses to put prices up, which brings down inflation.
If we're supposed to carry the burden of this inflation, it should just be more equally distributed.
In the 1950s and 60s, increasing income tax was used to deal with higher inflation.
No government would do that these days. Under current arrangements, it's much more easy for politicians to say to people who are complaining about higher interest rates, oh, that's the decision of the Independent Reserve Bank. It's got nothing to do with us.
It's been suggested using superannuation contribution increases to bring down inflation would impact a broader spread of the population and benefit individuals rather than the banks. But there are some practical problems.
It would require legislation, which wouldn't necessarily get through the Parliament. And that means that it would be a much slower response to rising inflation than changing interest rates, which can be done more or less overnight.
And the evidence shows, however painful, raising interest rates works to bring down inflation, meaning for now, mortgage holders like Daniel will have to continue to put in the extra hours to keep the economy in check. Fiona Blackwood, ABC News.
2 climate activists have been arrested for throwing soup at the Mona Lisa in Paris. A crowd looked on in surprise as 2 women crossed a security barrier and hurled food at the famous artwork. They yelled slogans advocating for a sustainable food system before being arrested. Bulletproof glass protects the Leonardo da Vinci painting, so it wasn't damaged. Coming up on 7:30, Sarah Ferguson is joined by US Senator and former presidential candidate Bernie Sanders.
What's at stake for America if Donald Trump wins the presidency?
Everything is at stake. There are struggles about whether or not nations will remain democratic or move toward oligarchy, move toward autocracy. And certainly if the United States moves in an authoritarian way, it will certainly send a signal to every country on earth that that's the future of politics in this world.
To finance now, and the local share market's winning streak continued today with the 6th rise in a row. Here's Alan Kohler.
Woolworths shares went backwards a tiny amount while Coles went up after Woolworths said that things are really tough in New Zealand at the moment, so it's writing down the value of its Kiwi business by $1.5 billion and also booking a loss of $200 million on the value of Dan Murphy's. But these are book entries, not actual cash, so investors weren't too bothered. Apart from that, banks went up, miners went down, and the All Ordinaries had its 6th consecutive rise. Oh, and the Australian green cement technology business, Calix, acquired some cement shoes after reporting that it has to relocate a low-carbon cement project in Germany from Hanover to somewhere else. They're not sure where yet. The Shanghai stock market was untroubled by the liquidation of the Evergrande Group, which was well anticipated. It has collapsed, owing more than $500 billion, so its debts are larger than the market value of the entire Australian banking system. The debts are obvious and the creditors numerous, but the liquidators might have some trouble finding and seizing the assets. On commodity markets, oil and iron ore went up, copper and gold went down, and the Australian dollar edged a little higher, still under 66 US cents. Now, the nation's economists are starting to produce their reports on last week's Stage 3 tax announcement. Here's a chart from CBA showing the tax-to-income ratio overall for the whole country. Huge rise from bracket creep since 2008. Bit of a fall in 2018 with Stages 1 and 2 of the Morrison government reforms, and then another big rise and a bit of a fall from Stage 3, Mark 2. Net change overall lately, not much. And that's finance.
In tennis, newly crowned Australian Open men's champion Jannik Sinner is still absorbing his maiden Grand Slam win after a sleepless night of celebration. Sinner last night staged an astonishing fight back from 2 sets down to beat Daniil Medvedev in 5 thrilling sets. The 22-year-old became the first Italian man to win at Melbourne Park in a result that signals a new era in men's tennis.
Bleary-eyed but calm and content, Jannik Sinner held a Grand Slam trophy for the first time, just hours after the most significant milestone of his young career.
I didn't sleep much, but it's, you know, great emotions, you know, slowly realizing what I've done. It's a great achievement for me and my team.
Sinner seals the deal with an epic comeback.
Victory in the most unlikely of circumstances. An early finish appeared certain when Daniil Medvedev controlled the opening 2 sets.
And Medvedev taking charge of this final.
But a steely Sinner showed composure beyond his years.
And he's got it. He's back in this match. What an effort.
He won the next 2 sets, and as fatigue set in for the Russian, Sinner seized the moment, bringing the crowd to their feet, including superfans the Carota boys. Sinner's maiden major is another step for the next generation in men's tennis, although the 22-year-old is not thinking about Novak Djokovic's record just yet.
I'm just happy that I have this trophy for this year, and then we see what's coming.
For Medvedev, it was 3rd time unlucky in Australia.
I wanted to win. I was close. Was I really close or not? Tough to say, but was not far.
After another tournament featuring late-night finishes, organisers are searching for ways to shorten matches. They've proposed to eliminate lets.
The extra time that it took over these 2 weeks of the event was over 15 hours. So it's significant.
Tom Maddox, ABC News, Melbourne.
The Socceroos have set up a blockbuster quarter-final clash at the Asian Cup against either Saudi Arabia or South Korea after they defeated Indonesia 4-0 last night in the round of 16. Australia again struggled for fluidity in attack early on and went ahead from a deflected strike from Jackson Irvine. That lead was doubled before half-time when Martin Boyle got on the end of an excellent cross. Late goals from Craig Goodwin and defender Harry Souttar added some gloss to the Socceroos win ahead of what will be a tough quarter-final.
We've got 4 days break now, and you know, we'll go and watch their game in the next couple of days. And you know, as I said, I truly believe that this result will build the belief even more in the group.
Australia has cemented its position as the best team in world netball by defeating England 69-49 in the Nations Cup final in Leeds. The victory is Australia's biggest over England in 8 years, with star goal shooter Sophie Garben controlling the circle by making 31 of her 32 attempts to win Player of the Match honours. Australia went through the tournament undefeated and has now won every netball trophy it's challenged since 2022.
It's hard to win here, it's hard to win international netball, and that's been our theme for this game. And I thought they came out of the blocks hard, and, you know, we built momentum, but everyone kept supporting each other. And then, you know, to be able to inject the changes and keep winning the fourth quarter was, you know, it's really pleasing.
The Adelaide 36ers have re-signed DJ Vasiljevic on a multi-year deal, locking in the star for the next 3 seasons. Vasiljevic joined the club early this season and made an instant impact, averaging more than 18 points per game. The 190-centimetre guard says his decision to stay long-term was easy, and he hopes other out-of-contract players follow his lead, including in-form centre Isaac Humphries. He's also backed interim coach Scott Ninnis to get another deal after Adelaide's late-season surge up the ladder.
I think Scotty does deserve another chance. I think he's proven a lot of people wrong, and obviously his loyalty to the club, and I think one more year for Scotty to actually prove himself, have a good pre-season. I think we can do really well under him.
It's a story that sounds like fiction. A group of friends start a local football team in England which rises to stratospheric heights. But as Elias Kluwer reports, the Dorking Wanderers are showing the world how it's done.
30 kilometres from the centre of London, a football fairy tale in the making.
£5 a goal from now, paid Saturday. Oh, yes!
This is Mark White and his unlikely, rough-around-the-edges success story, the Dorking Wanderers.
Me and my mates, we were going to Premier League football, and we got a bit bored of it, and we just thought we'd start playing, have a fun side on a Saturday. It was just a social thing. We was in basically the equivalent of like Division 17.
The affable Londoner working a 9-to-5 job started what's known as a park team, social football anyone can play. Dorking kept winning, being promoted to higher and higher leagues, right up to the semi-professional National Conference League.
We've had 12 promotions, we've done really well. I've learned an awful lot as I've gone along.
Despite having no experience in coaching, Mark's colourful management style has not only been successful, it's earned him a worldwide following. Dorking's behind-the-scenes TikTok has over 17 million likes.
You must be bored. You must be bored. Whatever, mate. Not been at school or something.
As Dorking grows into a formidable football force, Mark continues to own, run and coach the club.
So Dorking's gone from playing on a park to a relatively impressive field, but its next step will be its biggest one yet, to the EFL, which is home to the biggest and richest clubs in England.
We just want to keep driving forward and embracing people on our journey, you know.
The Wanderers are daring to dream of one day reaching the Premier League. Elias Kluwer, ABC News, Dorking.
On to the weather details now, and tonight's photo taken in Bel Air National Park was sent to us by Nigel Mugridge. Conditions were fine and sunny across Adelaide today. The mercury rose to 29.8 degrees around 3 o'clock this afternoon after an overnight low of 16.3. A weakening cold front brought cloudy conditions about areas of the south, and there was stormy weather near the western border, but it was fine elsewhere. A scorching 43 in Oodnadatta, 29 in Minlaton. Cloud over the north of the continent in troughs will continue to generate showers and storms there. That cloud over the east in another trough is also bringing wet and stormy weather, causing potential flooding and incredibly humid conditions there. Cool southerlies will bring a mild day to the southeast, while easterly winds strengthen and heat up southwest WA, triggering a hot day in Perth with 36 degrees. It'll be cloudy with 29 in the national capital, sunny and 25 for Hobart. Back home, dry and hot across the north with gusty winds in several districts, 39 for Coober Pedy, 31 in Port Augusta. Cooler in the south, partly cloudy about the coast and staying fine in the major centres, 32 for Lameroo, 27 for Coonawarra. There's a strong wind warning tomorrow for Spencer Gulf and Gulf St Vincent. A fine day for Adelaide with cool southerly winds around the middle of the day, 28 for the city, down to 15 overnight. On the waters, those southerly winds will reach 25 knots north of Grange in the afternoon, with seas to 2 metres around midday. The sun will rise a tad after 6:30 and set just before 8:30. It'll stay fine and warm to hot for the rest of the week ahead, climbing to 29 on Friday, up to 32 Saturday and 29 degrees on Sunday. And that's the latest from the Adelaide newsroom. Thanks for your company. Stay with us. Sarah Ferguson is next with 7:30. Good night.